Welcome to Coffee in the Library. We are back with Pastor Sirale for another episode. This is one of those I was looking forward to, but also not looking forward to, because it can be quite testy.
Yeah.
But here we go. We are talking about disagreeing with your church leaders. For those of you who are not aware, Pastor Sirale is my church leader. So this one is about when you disagree with your church leaders on the direction that on different things. So to set some context to it, why is this a relevant topic? The virus of unnamed origin that we have been dealing with for the last 2 years has resulted in a lot of decisions being made by church leaders on a number of issues. I actually heard it said just the other day that it's presented a lot of difficulties for church leaders because whatever you do, you'll be criticized.
Yeah.
You do something, you're criticized. You don't do something, you're criticized. You talk about it, you're criticized. You don't talk about it. So there's all of these issues around it. So let's start from the basics, right? Is it okay to disagree with your church leaders, or does it mean that there is something wrong?
Okay. So that's an interesting question, but also an interesting topic as well. Is it okay to disagree with your leaders? Yes, it is okay. End of story. Bye-bye.
This has been Coffee in the Library.
Yeah, but look, it is okay to disagree with your church leaders, and there will be numerous times when you disagree with your church leaders. But also, as you disagree, you really need to ask yourself, what is it that I'm disagreeing with, or what is that you've disagreed on with my leaders? And once that is established, then it helps you now to know what will be the next course of action.
Yeah. So there is a disagreement, and it's okay to have that disagreement. So let's use this virus of unnamed origin. Church leaders have done something, and you think there's a problem with that. How do you go about addressing it? What steps should you take in terms of trying to address the problem?
And I think the Bible doesn't leave us to guess.
Yeah.
The Bible does give us examples of guidelines that we can use. And I always use immediately go to Matthew 18. If a brother sins against you, that kind of principle. Matthew 18, 15 to 18. Now the principle, I always say, it's about disagreement with a brother, but can also be used. I mean, your church leaders are your brothers. And so the principle must always be, if it's your elders, seek an audience with them. If you want collectively, if they're a lot, or if you're one of them, and begin and say what it is that you've disagreed on. And then that just also gives you a platform to hear their side and why they've opted to go that route. Now, one of the things that we must also be clear is, before we get to the COVID, is a preliminaries, is that you must also bear in mind that the Bible gives us what I refer to as biblical dogmatics, which do not change wherever you are, because that's what the Bible says. What it says about God, what it says about His worship, who Christ is, those are clear biblical dogmatics. Those are essentials, those are fundamental. And then there will be what I refer to as church dogmatics. That would change depending on who the leaders are or which church you are in. They may place emphasis on certain aspects of practice as a result of what they believe or what they see from the scriptures. And so when we think of COVID is one one area, one issue or one area, one topic that has sort of brought about different reactions. And that has made church leaders to really ask themselves, what is it that will be the best? In this case, bearing in mind that we'll give an account to God. And this account is not how we responded to one person, but how we responded to the people that God brought before us. And so the elders or your leaders would have sat and would like to believe that they would have prayed and then say, this is the course of action that we are going to take. And therefore, you as an individual, while you may disagree on the wisdom or the decision that your elders have taken, but at least you need to first of all recognize that most likely they did not just come up with a decision out of the blue. They must have consulted each other, prayed, and therefore thought this is the best decision to take in view of where we are as a church and in view what is prevailing.
Let me bring us back just a bit so that we can move forward at the same pace. I think one of the big questions that has to be answered by the individual who has a problem first is whether is this problem serious or not, or is this something that I should is it serious and that is it something worth discussing? Not all grievances are supposed to be sort of discussed. There are some things that are let's say a church leader did something you did not like. I'll use COVID is just the easiest example at hand. Let's say one of the church leaders sprays the microphone, for COVID, sanitizes the microphone, right? You may have an issue with that, but that's not exactly something to be like, let me go and address because there should be some wisdom. Maybe that's not a hill to die on. It's not a discussion worth having, unless it's destroying the microphone, right? But then there are some things that are serious where you should address this. So how should the individual church member process whether this is something that is serious enough for me to seek an audience with the church leader about to address? Because all of us are dealing with this issue. Sometimes we write it off, sometimes it's a real issue, but we say it's not serious. And sometimes it's not an issue, and we make it serious. So how do we determine whether this issue is serious enough for us to approach the church leader about?
I think sometimes it also depends with the maturity of the person. Because the fact that something has troubled you or bothered you, then it's serious to you. And therefore, in all wisdom, find a way to address it because it's bothering you or there's sort of troubling you. But your maturity also be able to say, look, I don't think this is something I should take and try and address it with the elders. But if it's sort of troubling you, and therefore because it's troubling you, it's making each time you see that elder or you see that person, your leaders, it sort of just troubles you and therefore it doesn't leave you at peace.
Is this what the Bible refers to as stumbling? So
you are being stumbled. I was going to come to that. Then there's need for you to address it, so that at least you get an audience and a response.
So can we define stumbling for the sake of this conversation? Stumbling is something that gets in the way of fellowship, of right fellowship. So
with the person.
Every time you're saying the church leaders, rather than you thinking, hey, how is he doing? How's his family engaging in a normal way? This thing is a hindrance.
Constantly protruding or nagging.
Yes.
Then there's cause to address it. There's cause to address it. And that's why I began from Matthew 18. I said the principle can be applied in this. It says, if a brother sins against you, but it may not be that they've sinned against you, but they've done something that sort of is stumbling you, and therefore preventing that open fellowship, then there's need to address it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So and I would assume that's why you said maturity, because there are some things that would be an issue for me
Yeah.
that are not an issue for another brother.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not stumbling him,
Exactly.
but it's stumbling me.
Yeah, that's why I say the maturity of a person
Yes.
also matters. And I think our leaders also know
Yeah.
that when they're giving audience, they're also open to try and see what's the maturity
Yeah.
of a person, even as they respond.
Yeah.
Because there are times I remember some of the things I would bring to my elders.
Yeah.
Now I look back, I was like, okay, yeah, now I was young, full of zeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the zeal of the Lord was consuming me.
Yeah.
So you address it by the way they responded.
Yeah.
They didn't shove it.
Yeah.
They gave me an audience.
Yeah.
And then in me expressing myself, I would ask pointed questions that sort of would open you to think or look at the other possibility or another way of looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, really, the issue must be seek an audience
Yeah.
so that you are not constantly being stumbled and therefore failing to worship your God properly or the right fellowship with the person or with the leaders. But then the other issue must be, is their teaching or what it is that they are promoting or teaching, is it conforming to the message of the apostles of the Bible?
Yeah.
If it's not, then yeah, that's a lot more serious.
Yeah.
Because then there's a problem, because there's a fundamental shift from the scriptures.
Yeah.
And therefore one must be able to be forthright
Yeah.
and say, it's what the Bible teaches, and I think we've deviated because of 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you are sufficiently stumbled by what's going on. We're not all the same temperament-wise. Some are bulls in a china shop. They are very aggressive. They want to be in the elders' face and talk about it. Then there are those who are more soft-spoken. And so let's say we're dealing with a member who is stumbled, but says, I'm not the kind of person who, I'm shy. I'm reserved. How does one navigate that situation? Which one should override the other? Does stumbling override the fact that the person is reserved and more laid back, or does the temperament determine how does one navigate this?
Yeah, it's the seriousness of the issue at hand, and because that issue is hindering fellowship with the leaders or the other person. So it's not so much about personality. It's about what is the issue at hand. That's one. And then secondly, it's the fact that because the issue at hand is in many ways affecting your duties as a member or your responsibility as a member, that's serious enough to seek an audience with the person. So the temperament of an individual is simply, let me not use an avenue, but to simply add to the way the person approaches the matter. Not that it will reduce the seriousness or add to the seriousness. So you find that there are those who are quiet and they would have processed the issue and reached the point where I need to address this issue. Then there are those who just flare within the moment. And hey, I need to sit with you, address this issue. So the temperament simply shows or brings in the avenue of how the person goes about it or not. But the point is, if something is serious enough to causing you to be stumbled or to think about it many times or to ponder it on many occasions, then it must be able to be addressed.
Okay. I think I'm following.
Yeah.
So each believer should prioritize the unity within the body of Christ quite high. On the list of things that we value within the church, unity should be up there. And unity is this cohesive fellowship where nothing stands in the way of our fellowship with one another. Almost like the Acts 2 church, the church in Acts. We are so united And that's why we bring these things up, because not bringing them up is creating these hindrances to fellowship within the church.
Exactly, and in the example given of Acts, that's why you see that from chapter 2 all the way to chapter 6, something presented itself that would have brought about a disunity within the church and therefore causing the halting, if I could use that term, the spread of the gospel. There were those who are in need, and then so the believer responded by selling their possession. You have persecution, you have Ananias and Sapphira, and then you have the Grecians and the Hellenists complain, and therefore the apostles had to do that because they recognize that we must be one family. And Christ says, by this the world will know that you are my disciples. And so the unity of God's people must be paramount.
Yeah.
And that's why I said at the beginning that there are certain fundamentals that we deal with.
Yeah.
And those are the biblical dogmatics.
Yeah.
The practice or the preferences might be different.
Yeah.
But the fundamentals must be upheld.
Yeah.
And what that will mean is that because we have these fundamentals or an agreement, my personal preferences might be overlooked, or I might choose to overlook them because of the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I prioritize the unity of God's people. The example I'd like to think of is in Galatians 2, I think 11 to 14, where Paul had to rebuke Peter. And I like to believe Peter must have been a leader. Yeah. Now, Paul was concerned that the actions of Peter would lead to a fundamental drift in the church. And so what Peter was doing was that before the Jews came, he would interact with the Gentiles, eat freely, mingle with them. But now there are these Jews that came. And I think Galatians are the Jews from James. Peter started not hiding. Like, no, you don't want to interact with those. And Paul saw that to be a problem. Because he was basically being a hypocrite and he dealt with that. And so what we are saying there is, I think, is the fact that as God's people, first of all, we must be able to see what are the essentials, what are the fundamentals, what are the hills that I'm supposed to die on, and what are those things that I said, look, I can live with it.
Yeah.
And I may not be in agreement, but I can live with it. And that calls for maturity.
Yeah.
And once you know that, then you must be able to say, okay, this I'm willing to die on, this no. And that is key. And in doing that, it must not be about I, me, and myself. It must be for the good of the church and the promotion of the unity of God's people. And I think that's why you have a plurality of elders.
Yeah.
Because in the multitude of counsel there is wisdom. And so the elders will not just, no one will just say, no, I think this is what we should do. There's consultation, and therefore then the leader will say, this is what we'll do.
Yeah.
Having brought in many angles and factors, and also personal giftings and experience in the Christian walk, and therefore thinking for the good of the church, this is the direction we are going to take.
Yeah.
Now, oftentimes, individuals are so boxed up into their circle that their interest is just around them.
Yeah.
While they may argue that it's for the good of the church, but mainly when you are to break down the argument, it's really about, about the individual. And I will say that in that, at that point, when you disagree with your elders, do it in a respectful manner, having sought their audience, having heard their side, having, if you've got questions, having processed with them. And then you can actually say, look, I disagree on this point, and therefore maybe I'm leaving the church, or I disagree with you at this point. However, I still have trust in your leadership, bearing in mind that you will give an account to God and I'll follow what your guidelines are.
Yeah, you brought the example of Paul and of Paul and Peter from Galatians. Paul and Peter's disagreement it seems it was public.
Yeah.
Yes. So Matthew 18 indicates a private setting initially.
Yeah.
And then it also leaves some room for a public encounter,
Yeah.
if you will. So, firstly, is there room for that public disagreement, right? And yes, how do we get to that point? Because how do we get to if there is room? How do we get to the point of public disagreement? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the example of Galatians 2:11-14. I think it's public because it was in the public domain in that sense. And what I mean is, the Bible says, but when Cephas came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. For before certain men came from James, he was eating with the Gentiles. But when they came, he drew back and separated himself, fearing the circumcision.
The sin was public.
Yes.
And that's why he addressed it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But so if it's a public sin, like I said, that's why you need to, what is it that you're disagreeing on? Yeah. And if it's in a public sphere, it will be dealt with publicly.
Okay. Let's put an end.
Yeah.
So, in that moment, Paul is present. Peter is in the middle of the public the public showing of what was wrong, the public sin. Yeah. And so in that moment, Paul comes up and he says, Bwana, this is not right. Yeah. So it would be similar to you see an elder in the middle of, let's say, an illicit relationship. He's behaving inappropriately towards a young lady, and it's inappropriate. It's publicly inappropriate. Yeah. In that sense, you go up and you say, not that you're causing fracas, like, hey, let's stop this church meeting, elder. But he goes there and he says, there's a problem here. So, correct me if I'm wrong. It isn't that the sin has public implications, but that
the action of the sin.
The action of it's happening in front of you. So you're not living to fight another day. You're saying it's happening now, so let's address it now. Yeah. And not that there's public implications to this sin, therefore you're calling out the church elders in the middle of a church service or a church members meeting.
No, that's totally different. Here it's right in the action of the sin, and Paul comes in. Another example I would think of is, let's say, right in the church service, so we're about to start a church service, and then you see an elder showing favoritism. Yeah. At that particular moment when you've seen it, and it's evident, deal with it.
Yes. Okay.
Deal with it, because that will have implications to those around.
Exactly.
Yeah. But if it's an issue of it's an issue of the early examples we gave, COVID or a church practice or something.
Let me give an example. Let's say you notice. Let's say you notice that the elder only invites Tongas to read the Bible. Right? And then it's during a service, and he invites another Tonga to read. Is that? Would you put that as one of those, or is that one of those things where maybe it's a coincidence? You don't know enough information.
So it's one of those things that you would say, okay, look, I'll deal with it outside.
Yeah.
So it might be the elder is very sincere.
Yeah.
But in his mind, he doesn't see a tribe. Yeah. He sees the person who has the ability to read the scriptures publicly. Yeah. And so when you point out, might be, I didn't realize that. Yeah. Or give another reason.
So it should be the kind of thing where it's beyond there's no dispute here that what is happening here, not only is it sinful, it's intentional, it's all of this.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then that's why Paul was saying, he said, because he stood condemned.
Yes.
So look, there's no discussion. Man, you're wrong, you know.
Yeah.
So I have to deal with it here and there, so that those you have led astray will see this is not right.
Yeah. So in the absence of that, we should try to resolve issues behind the scenes, because we don't want to create unnecessary ruckus.
No.
That creates disunity within the body of Christ.
Exactly.
Yeah. If it can be resolved behind closed doors, we resolve it behind.
Exactly. And also bearing in mind what Paul, writing to Timothy, was saying in 1 Timothy 5, I think 17 to 19, about, look, before you bring an accusation before an elder, you're not saying don't, but basically say make sure you have enough evidence.
Exactly.
Or enough witnesses, credible ones before.
Yeah.
So because sometimes you may accuse God's servant when in actual sense
it's just a misunderstanding.
It's a misunderstanding, misunderstanding of pattern could have been dealt with.
Yeah.
But for you to think it's trying to maintain the purity of the church, in actual sense, it's like just being disobedient to God's leaders. Yeah.
That brings a lot of clarity. That brings a lot of clarity. How much time do we have left there?
I'm not sure, but it's still good.
Okay, we're at like minute 27. Okay. So landing this plane. Let's see whether I've got you right. Not only is it not wrong, it's not wrong to have disagreements with your elders. These things happen, right? You should be able to address them, especially if it presents a stumbling block to fellowship, fellowship between you and the elders, or fellowship within the church. You address public sins publicly, but you should have the discretion to address the vast majority of issues behind closed doors first, because you are still gathering information, you don't know what's going on. There should be wisdom and discretion about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because once you have enough evidence, you go before the person.
Yeah.
And if it's clear enough, like I said, Matthew 18, if it's clear enough, but the leaders can see, bring in mature people, and before long, then can be public. So look, I've addressed this thing. There's been no consensus in that Seva could use that term.
Yeah.
Or there's been no agreement, even though it's very clear where I'm coming from and the position and the issues I have.
So we're back at Matthew.
Yeah. And then ultimately, when it's coming to the church, it's basically more of a private thing where I say, okay, look, having sought audience with my leaders, and having shown them where I'm coming from or standing, and there's been no repentance or there'll be no change of mind, I'm withdrawing membership.
Yeah.
Or fine, at least you know where I stand.
Yeah.
And this is my position, that's your position. I trust your leadership. God will hold you accountable, and I'm with you.
That's right. That is very. I think that's very good. That's very good. Yeah. So we've come to the end of segment number 1. If you have any thoughts on this, we'd really like to hear from you. Comment section, let us know, contact us so that we hear. Maybe there's a part of this topic that we haven't exactly narrowed down on that you'd like us to address. Please get in touch with us. Let's hear from our sponsors, and then we come back for our book of the week in segment number 2. Welcome back to segment number 2 of Coffee in the Library. Pastor Simale, take it away. Book of the week.
All right, thank you. Jesse Ram, a practical religion. For your information, Jesse Ram was the Bishop of Liverpool.
Hey.
Not Liverpool football team, but
almost.
A church in Liverpool. Yeah, so if you need a biblical reason to support Liverpool, or a Christian one, there you have it.
JC Ryle. Come on. Come on, Liverpool.
Yeah. So he did a book on practical religion, and I think in this book, his goal really is to show that genuine scripture holiness will make a man do his duties at home, in the community, and in the church. He will live out his doctrines in a practical way. He doesn't want people to think that Christianity is the day-to-day life is separated from our understanding and our view of the Bible and of God. And so he brings out aspects of being meek, being self-controlled, being loving, being forgiving, and things like that, to show what your faith in God really is, or your Christianity. And also he tries to show that your duties at home must be as a result of your belief in God. And because of that, you are now showing that my understanding or my trust in the Bible is making me do A, B, C, D at home. And therefore, he should not just say at home, he must go beyond the home, whether it's in the community, it's at work, or it's at church. And so for him, his argument is Christianity is practical. He doesn't want us to present it as a separate thing from life. It's living for Christ in your day-to-day affairs of your life. I think it reminds me of the discussion outside we've been having on understanding B-men. A godly man at home, a godly man at work, a godly man at church. And those are Jesse Rowell's thoughts. And he really wants young people to understand and appreciate that. It's called practical religion.
And what's our rating for this one? Easy to read?
We'll put it at 8.
It's an 8? So this is for men, right? This is for like, are you ready to wrestle? This is the book, Practical Religion.
This is our banner of truth, trust.
Yes. Ladies, you can read it and then you also put it in front of your husband or your the guy you're in a relationship. But Bwana, start reading real material.
Because he also deals with kind and being gentle. So you may want that to get your boyfriend or your husband.
Well, thank you very much for that, Pastor. We'll put links for this stuff in the description so that you can find them on different book sending platforms. Most of the books are available in the Evergreen Bookshop here at Kabwata Baptist Church. So swing by and purchase one or two, for yourself or for a friend. We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you heard everything that we had presented. If you have any questions, once again, get in touch with us. Pastor Sewali and I are both on Facebook and Twitter. I think our information should be in some description box somewhere. So feel free to get in touch with us directly or with the Biblical Christianity page. And if you have any topics you'd like us to discuss next time, we'd love to hear from you. Till the next time, bye.
All right, bye. Thanks.